The myth of motivation. That's what we're going to talk about today. In our culture, we put great emphasis on motivation, and it comes from this core belief we hold, this core American principle that we hold dear, that we adhere to, and that is pursuing a free life, to pursue good things, to pursue happiness, to do the things we love for the well-being of ourselves, but also, and I think more importantly, for the well-being of others, providing value to society for the betterment of mankind. This is a very noble thing to think, and this is a very noble thing to do. So we see a lot of things. We see a cultural trend really in the last decade where we're doing startups and small businesses and producing and providing value to people, doing what we love, really finding our niche, if you will, and doing what we love. And I think that's a fantastic thing. But in the thick of it, you may have heard the question, maybe you've asked the question yourself, how do I stay motivated? How do I stay motivated to continue the work, to keep doing the work I love to do? And I've got the answer for you. Are you ready? You don't. You don't stay motivated. So before getting into the detail of why I think that, we have to go back to the basic form. And I'm no doctor, but I know enough about motivation to understand what it is. Motivation, in its scientific meaning, is the release of a chemical, what we see and know to be now as dopamine. And this happens in situations of pleasure, eating good food, maybe having intimacy with someone you love, or maybe feeling a good high, if you will, after working out. So it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling chemical. There's also another situation where the motivation is not experiencing pleasure. It's actually experiencing a response, a fight or flight response when confronting or getting away from a dire situation. So in the scientific realm, motivation is simply that. It's a chemical for pleasure or for self-preservation. So with that, if we look at it in those terms, that question, how do we stay motivated, is actually, in truth, the question, how do I get this chemical high in order to produce the work I want to produce? Now, from my experience of doing hundreds of hours on my craft, producing my craft, homing in on those specific skills, composing electronic music and all of that, practicing the violin, performing different pieces, I can say without a doubt that you can put in the effort and you can put in the hours, and those will be fruitful in the end. But I will say to you that you're going to have highs and you're going to have lows. You're going to have peaks and you're going to have troughs, the hills and the valleys. And that is okay. That is normal. In fact, that is a reflection of the physical, natural world. So when you perceive things like sound, what you are actually taking in as input are sound waves going up and down in oscillations and reflections off the walls and the surfaces. Those oscillations also have peaks and troughs. And even at fixed points, they go back and forth at peaks and troughs and phasing in and out. The color we perceive, that is from the electromagnetic spectrum. That is light. Those are waves from that kind of information, that electromagnetic information. Those also, in an imperceptible way, are peaks and troughs, back and forth, ebb and flow. Communication, whether it's directly to you or into a microphone to be decoded in the future digitally, or maybe radio waves, communication with broadcasting and all of that, those include things like peaks and troughs, ebb and flow, the way rivers run, and the way, mountains are vertical and hills and valleys and all of that. So topography, geographically speaking, scientifically speaking, you have highs and lows of the natural world. So, putting that into a new perspective, we can accept that we have highs and lows in our routine, in our emotional state, in our cerebral state, whatever we're doing. Even if it's work we love to do, you're not going to be on a high all the time. And that's the risk of motivation, if you will. If we want to follow the natural world as we are naturally designed to do as human beings, it would be unhealthy even to be locked in a stasis of some sort of hypertension where there's potential and kinetic energy. We're just not designed to be that. So I think when people go maybe into a new business, maybe to do a new endeavor, approach a new thing, maybe not considering that there will be times where you're in this, what I call an emotional lull, where you just work because you have to work. There's no other way of going around it. You do the work because you have to. I put deadlines on myself, so I have to finish something and move on to the next thing. And even if I don't feel like it, even if it's something I absolutely love to do, I do it anyway, because you just have to finish that, and you have to build your skill. So that's what I wanted to encourage, that it's quite risky to actually want to seek motivation or seek staying motivation. You actually shouldn't seek motivation. You shouldn't seek that chemical high in the brain. With that, I do want to encourage you that it does come, but possibly to the chagrin of a few people, it doesn't come before the work. It comes during the work. So as you have ebb and flow, you will have times where you can work several hours in a row or a few days in a row with no real change in the mood, nothing to pique your mood. But then there are some discoveries. For instance, I can work in SuperCollider and learn it and just think, I'm just going through the routine. I'm not feeling any good high there, but I actually do have joy. There's a constant kind of subtle joy that I have just with practice. That is a side note I want to throw in there. But I'm not inspired like I just ran and I feel great. I'm just sitting in my chair, working at my desk. But then there are those rare moments where I discover something and it's the best thing. And I remember, I can't even remember what I discovered. This was a couple years ago. And I was so excited. I went to work and I was driving on a highway and I thought I could be in a car accident and it will still be a great day because I discovered something super cool. Can't even remember what it was, but that was a moment of motivation, of inspiration, but it's not constant. It is back and forth, and do expect in the process, have a realistic understanding that it's not only going to be inconsistent, you're actually probably going to be in a state, an emotional state that is actually slower and more relaxed and more composed and less that kind of gung-ho, go-getter kind of fiery American spirit that we have. Don't look for that. Don't look for that. Those discoveries will happen as you work, as you get better. Now, if we consider all of that, if we consider the scientific definition of motivation, and we consider that our bodies, our brain, and our mind are kind of working at this ebb and flow natural state like we see examples in the natural world, why would we ask that question? How do I stay motivated? And I have a couple of ideas why that would be so. The first is when you're starting something. We'll use the situation where you're starting something, where you're just learning something new. Whether you want to pursue it or not, learning something new is a bit of a task. It is a tall order on your mind, on your brain, even if you have a very keen interest in pursuing that. Because when we start, we're automatically bad at it. Even if we're natural at it, even if we have this desire and the willingness to learn, we're bad. I'm a violin teacher. Whether my student is a child or whether my student is an adult, there is that definite, almost inevitable frustration that I see on their face when they're grunting through getting that violin tone, because so much goes into making that violin tone. A lot of things with dexterity and strength of the left hand, a lot of coordination with the bow. There's so much. There are multiple parameters that go into getting that nice, warm, natural violin tone. And so even if they're interested in learning the violin, it's objective to say that they're not good. I wasn't good when I started, even though I am naturally gifted in the area of music. So when you learn something new, as much as you like it, as much as you desire to be a master in it even, going through the process is actually a tough one, in that we don't like doing things that are difficult for us. I'll give you an example for me. Even though I'm a professional violinist, I'll walk through some very difficult bowing exercises. And I have this book that I'm going through, Tartini's bowing exercises, and there's an excerpt of music that has 45 variations. And I think I just finished variation 15. I know for a fact that variation 11 is my bane. I sound awful, and I have absolutely no control. I do not know how to control the bow effectively with this one particular variation. So I just want to play Ralph Vaughan Williams' Lark Ascending and sound great. And so even as a professional, it's very hard to kind of just stick to it and do the work, and do it even if you don't feel good, and do it even if it sounds bad. And that's where I encourage my students too. So I think people, especially when they're in a position of learning something new, or even having to go at it for a few years, getting better at something, especially when you start, is a very difficult position. It's a difficult mental position to be in as a human being. I have another idea of why we keep asking ourselves, how do we stay motivated? And this idea is more a theory, but it's a theory that has come from just observing people, observing language, observing phrases, and really talking with my sister, for instance. We sort of came to this conclusion together. She has an incredible work ethic. She's got very strong work ethics, and as we were mulling over some ideas about work, we came to the conclusion, and I think she was first to come to this conclusion, that we don't respect work. In our culture in the United States, can't speak for any other region or country of the world, but in our culture here in the United States, we've actually lost admiration and respect. We've actually lost our high regard for work. And it's not a kind of work. I'm not talking about a vocation or a talent or a job. I'm actually talking about work itself. A lot of people who push for small businesses or YouTube influencers, I think they call themselves. They push this idea. They push statistics where you might see like a number like 78% of Americans are unhappy with their jobs, and what do we got? We got to do something about it, And it comes from this idea where we see, I don't want to be tied to a cubicle. I don't want to be tied to a desk. I don't want to have a ball and chain job. I'm kind of slogging away my 9 to 5 job. And it's if you think about it, it's a really bad attitude to have about work. I want to encourage you guys that no matter where you are in your profession, in a job, whatever you have to do, however you have to make ends meet, I want to encourage you to just practice respecting work as its own thing. So, and I can speak for myself, and to any of my students who are listening to this video, I really do like you guys, and I'm happy and grateful for teaching you. But a lot of people assume that because I'm a music teacher, it's instant value. You get social benefits as a teacher, and they're like, oh, you're teaching music to students, you're teaching violin to students, and all that. At least you don't have a ball and chain job. It's not a 9 to 5 job where you're tied to a desk and all of that. And that's what they say. I've heard a few people say this to me. And I actually have to say to them, I say, I understand where you're coming from, but actually teaching music, even though it's music, and even though I'm natural at teaching the violin and I know how to teach the violin and I'm with the violin all the time, even though I'm natural at teaching and even though I'm great with kids and great with my adult students, by society standards, I can also see it as a 9 to 5 job, having that attitude. If money weren't the issue, I would be composing and writing some science fiction every day. Well, I do compose and write science fiction every day, but I can do it and volunteer and all that stuff. I wouldn't be teaching, is what I'm saying. But that's not discounting the work. That's not disrespecting the job. It's not disrespecting the occupation. There's value in teaching, but it's not teaching. It's not that. There's value in work itself. So how do we get over that hump? How do we get rid of that impulse, that need to have that chemical induction and release that we call motivation? Not to be confused with inspiration. That's a whole nother thing, but we do use those two words interchangeably. I'm talking about the chemical reaction. How do we get over that need, that addiction, if you will, for that chemical high? Well, as the brain has these hormonal responses and these chemical responses for situations, pleasure or confrontation and facing a danger, the brain also favors habit. And habit is the thing you need to get through the day, to work when you don't feel like it. When you're in a mood or kind of an emotion where you just don't feel like it, the brain will actually start pumping messages to you. If you're not doing an activity, after a few months of doing this every day as a routine, as a habit, the brain will start pumping some messages to you saying, I thought we were going to do this today. If you're not doing the activity you've been doing at a certain frequency, the brain is malleable, but it loves routine, it loves habit. So whatever you want to do, no matter how hard it is, no matter how difficult it is, go ahead and create, make it a habit. Discipline yourself to make it a habit. And I've got news for you. We stress on how we need to be disciplined as individuals. We actually don't need discipline. We need habit. Now, it does take discipline to create a habit, but once that habit is locked in place, we actually can do things even when we don't feel like it. We can actually do things with relative ease, even when it's difficult for us. The actual action is easy to do because we've got it locked in. Our brain is signaling to us and saying, are you doing this? And you almost feel like this guilt, this like, I don't want to do this, but I know I have to. And you do. And that's the magic of it, if you want to use that word, like the psychotherapists use, that magic pill. No, it's actually your brain doing you a favor. You've disciplined yourself, and then you made it a daily routine. And once you make something a daily routine, even if it's 20 to 30 minutes a day, I stress this to my students all the time. If you make it a daily routine, your brain is going to signal saying, when are we doing this? Okay, after dinner, you better be doing this. And you'll be washing dishes and feeling guilty that you're not doing it. So that's the great benefit of habit. So you don't need motivation. You don't need that chemical reaction, that pleasure reaction. You need habit, because you will work through that activity, through the highs and through the lows. So make what you want be your daily activity, and make it all about frequency. That is the natural order of things. And I wanted to end the video with a quote by Tchaikovsky, the great Russian composer of the late Romantic period. All sources are pointing this quote to him, but whether it belongs to him or belongs to someone else, it is worth reading. So here's his take on inspiration, and he uses the word inspiration in a way I think we can use as we use motivation today. So here's his quote. There's no doubt that even the greatest musical geniuses have sometimes worked without inspiration. This guest, inspiration, does not always respond to the first invitation. We must always work, and a self-respecting artist must not fold his hands on the pretext that he is not in the mood. If we wait for the mood without endeavoring to meet it halfway, we easily become indolent and apathetic. We must be patient and believe that inspiration will come to those who can master their disinclination. Thanks always for watching and listening. Always be on the lookout for some sound experimentation every Thursday, commentary every Tuesday, and until then, happy producing the art you love, and I will see you next time. Thanks again.